Good afternoon. I'm Rod Cox. I'm with the Command General Staff College Foundation, and welcome to this sixth presentation in Academic Year 20's series presentation of the InterAgency Brown-Bag Lecture Series. On behalf of our partners, the Command General Staff School, Colonel Scott Green and Mr. Marv Nichols, we welcome you to this presentation, which is designed to enhance your interagency education and awareness while here at the Command General Staff College. This lecture series is made possible by our sponsors, the Foundation, two of which I'll mention, the Perot Family Foundation, and then our local sponsors here, the First Command Financial Planning folks. Thank you all very much. They're the ones that supplied the water. And if you haven't signed up for one of their brown bag lunches, you can do so and have a lunch like a couple people have in the sacks here. As part of the presentation, you just need to see one of the folks here, and they'll be happy to sign you up for that for next time. So thanks to Lonnie Bowman and the First Command financial team here locally for their support of the Foundation in this particular activity. I want to call your attention to a couple things, and I see Ralph's probably going to use a couple up in here, but we have the latest edition of the InterAgency Journal, but also we've just put out our latest edition of the last spring's Ethics Symposium here at the college. These copies are available both online at our website and then also in hard copy downstairs in the magazine rack by the Foundation offices. So if you haven't seen this, I commend this to your reading. It's a series of papers that were presented at the last Ethics Symposium by academia, folks who visited, other members of the faculty and the student body from last year's class. Our next InterAgency Brown Bag will be the 25th of February right here, and it'll be a discussion by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I think they're going to talk about WMD response. Be right here, and as I mentioned, if you want to sign up for a lunch in advance, just see the First Command folks and they'll have that for you. But same time, same location, 25 February here with the FBI. I will point out to you today that today's presentation is in fact being recorded. So what that means to you as our audience, if you have a question or you want to engage in dialogue with the speaker, I would ask that you move to the vicinity of one of the microphones. The folks in the control booth will orchestrate it for you, so you don't need to touch any of the buttons. But that way that'll enable those from the distance learning sites, the satellite schools, and the interagency practitioners that will view this off our website, the ability to hear your question and be part of that conversation as they watch the recording. All right, now to business at hand. It's our pleasure for today's presentation to present on the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. The NGA is both a combat support agency under the Department of Defense and is an intelligence agency as part of the United States intelligence community. The variety of ways that NGA impacts on our mission requirements both at home and abroad is very great in our daily lives as well, and is pretty stunning in the array. Most of us don't even realize the impact that NGA has. Their website says, and I invite you to visit their website, it's a very good and informative website. Their website says NGA brings together analysis of terrain, elevation, gravity, and more to reveal not only what is happening, but what's going to happen next. Now we have the pleasure today of having an expert to discuss NGA. Mr. Ralph Erwin is the Senior Geospatial Intelligence Officer assigned by the Army National Geospatial Intelligence Agency support team to be the NGA Liaison to the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, the Combined Arms, and the Combined Arms Center. His responsibilities include integration of geospatial intelligence education into U.S. Army TRADOC education institutions, all CAC elements in the Command and General Staff College. He's a Director of National Intelligence, designated so by the intelligence community, designated as an Intelligence Community Officer by the DNI, and has served as a senior mentor to the Afghan Geodesy and Cartography head of office in 2011. Mr. Irwin's other service to our country and in the private sector includes duty as the Deputy Director of the U.S. Army TRADOC Program Integration Office for Terrain Data at the U.S. Army Engineer School, service as a U.S. Army Field Artillery Officer, time at DARPA, and as a Topographic Systems Combat Developer for Lockheed Martin. Mr. Erwin is a graduate of Wentworth Military Academy, and he holds a BS in Mathematics from Cameron University. He also holds a Master of Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College. Please welcome Mr. Ralph Erwin.
Thank you. Thank you, Rod. So I wanted to begin by talking about last summer. My wife was driving down 4th Street. She had her 2 grandsons in the back seat. Went to one of those 5 or 20 lights that are on 4th Street there. And they stopped at the light. A woman drove up next to them in a convertible. The top was down. The woman stood up in the driver's seat and she was completely naked. My 8-year-old grandson said, "Grandma, she doesn't have her seatbelt on." So it's all a matter of perspective. So I want to talk about perspective. Rod gave a lot of lead in there that I'm going to take advantage of to talk to you about. First thing is, I use this word unclassified. Unclassified because we're an intelligence agency. We deal in a classified world. And so we don't always talk unclassified. So I'm going to explain a few things, and especially for the students that were here last August. So in August, Admiral Sharp, the director of NGA, came and spoke to the student body. I'm going to use some of his information and add to that to talk about the roles and missions, to give you greater fidelity and greater information. So we start out with the intelligence community. And that intelligence community has all of these 16 different agencies that are part of it, and one of those is the Army. And so the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and the Marines are part of that, as well as other parts of the U.S. government that deal in intelligence. It even might surprise you that the State Department, Homeland Security, they have intelligence elements that we collaborate with. I'll talk a little bit more about some of those agencies as I continue. So we have this intelligence community. So the Director of National Intelligence, who knows who the Director of National Intelligence is today? What is that person's name? Can you name a former DNI? Sorry, somebody said? Coates? Negroponte was the first. Anybody else? There's only been 5 assigned, 5 approved by the Senate. 2 have, now we're in the 3rd acting one. McGuire is the current acting Director of National Intelligence. And the Secretary of Defense today is Mark Esper. And so our director, Admiral Sharp, reports to those 2 people for funds and direction. And so the National Defense Strategy and the National Intelligence Strategy are the documents from those 2 offices that drive what NGA does. As the National Intelligence Strategy says, is that we are driven by the National Intelligence Priorities Framework. So there's an entire framework that drives what we do every day. And so we have this thing we call Geoint. Geoint is in the Army one of the 7 intelligence disciplines. And geospatial engineering is one of the 3 engineering disciplines in the Army. We're involved in both the engineering and the intelligence aspects as we support Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, and other elements of the intelligence community. So this is a statement that I'd like to make sure that you grasp, is that Geoint is that imagery intelligence, geospatial information that describes and depicts features, activities, and locations on Earth. And so if you think about each one of us, we have a unique location. We all have a unique activity right now. And so we're going to depict that human domain on something for a decision maker to make good decisions. So we'll hand that to a leader. And so this geospatial intelligence is our tradecraft, our day-to-day business. And that's pretty heavy because imagery and imagery intelligence, we're dealing with space-based platforms, we're dealing with airborne platforms, and in some cases, on-the-ground platforms. Multiple sensors and sources that we're gathering information from in order for us to do that. And I'll explain a little bit more about that and talk about as we go for know the Earth, show the way, and understand the world. So again, we go back to using imagery and imagery intelligence and geospatial information to describe and depict those activities and features and locations on the Earth. And so knowing, showing, and understanding is our motto, if you will. And how do we do that? We start out with this thing called Foundation Geoint. Now, this is a lot of numbers and a lot of information on that chart, but if you look at the human and political geography, science, air, land, sea, you would have also had in there what the military calls the multi-domain operations. We'll also get into the space and cyber because, again, it has locations, activities, and features that we're putting on the Earth's surface. We're adding an X and a Y and a Z, a latitude, longitude, and a vertical dimension. And so we're adding that information. So if you take that human geography, the names, boundary names, land names, it's NGA's responsibility to do something called GeoNames. So we attend the GeoNames Board of Governance, and we're the ones that determine how the U.S. government spells the word Baghdad, or how we spell Kandahar. Have you ever seen Kandahar spelled differently in different places? It's an NGA responsibility to determine how we spell it in the U.S. government, based upon our studies and based upon our linguist, and that's our responsibility. That gets into that human domain. Does anybody know what the Durand Line is? So 19th century Dr. Durand, a British geographer, he determined the boundary which we still recognize today between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And does Afghanistan and Pakistan recognize that boundary? No. It's a U.S., we drew the line, and that's a U.S. government stance of that is the boundary. And so we had to make that determination. We've done the same thing as in the East Germany, West Germany, and so we did that same thing many years ago. So the science, so Rod mentioned one of my responsibilities that I did working with the Afghan government, we did something called Geodesy. And Geodesy or Geodetic Survey gets into the magnetics and gravity. And so gravity and magnetics have a significant impact on targeting and safety of navigation. Sea level changes throughout the Earth's surface based upon gravity. That's a constant change. And also this thing, WGS-84. Every soldier that's ever had a map in their hand, they know what WGS-84, except you don't know where it came from. And you don't understand why we don't have a WGS 2020. Maybe we don't need one. Maybe WGS-84 gives us a frame of reference that's sufficient enough, and we modify from that, minor modifications. So 11 global GPS sites. And so NGA has a connection with location again, that location on the Earth's surface. And so we have those ground sites to communicate with the GPS constellation. Who operates the GPS constellation? You can't say anything. So the Air Force has the responsibility to operate the GPS constellation. NGA tells the GPS satellites where they're at. We give them the location, and so that our ground sites, along with Air Force ground sites and other allied ground sites, we're able to determine the location, and so that you can turn on your cell phone and you can accurately drop a point on your Google map, and then you'll know exactly where you're at, and you can share that point with somebody else. And so that's an NGA responsibility. That's the science piece. Aeronautical piece, we get into data elements. Aeronautical, the big thing that you need to take away is safety of navigation. There's no aircraft that flies any place in the world in which they don't connect to an NGA product. NGA provides that information. NGA develops that, they work it, they share it every 30 days. That's a constant information so that safety of navigation for everything of U.S. national interest. And that means every aircraft that's in the air. That's our responsibility. And so vertical obstructions, pilots do not like vertical obstructions. They don't like cell phone towers in the fog. They don't like mountains. So you might remember back in 1986, I believe it was, is that right, Brad? When the Secretary of Commerce ran into a mountain in the Balkans. And so that was a significant wake-up call that we needed to know vertical obstructions, and we needed to know elevation of the Earth's surface better and map it better and share it better. And so that was a major responsibility of NGA and our predecessor organizations. Land, topographic features. So whether you're talking a road, a river, a forest, a wheat field, a utility pole and wires, you're talking where the bus stations are. So we talk to soldiers, and soldiers want to know the PMISI. So the political, military, economic, social, infrastructure information about an area. Even getting into trash and getting into other activities, educational facilities, all types of information, and you wanted us to tell you instantly where all of those are. And so that's a responsibility that NGA takes very seriously, and we're doing that by standard maps. So standard maps is not a 21st century solution, in my opinion, because we have the ability to provide you current imagery and overlay it with those features. And if you ask me for a cartographic product, then you're using the same cartographic product that Christopher Columbus used. Christopher Columbus was a cartographer, so he was a map maker. You ask me for a 1 to 50,000 map sheet, okay, it's going to take a while, and once I make it, it's going to be out of date. But if I give you current imagery and overlay the current infrastructure on that image, now you have current information. It's a different mindset. So it says here 1/3 of the Earth's surface at 12-meter high-resolution elevation data. So we are collaborating with the Germans and the Italians for us to have high-resolution elevation data. You trust a contour line on a map, and you also want to engage a target to know exactly the z-value of that target when we hit it. And so based upon that, we need this high-resolution elevation data. So we're doing a lot of collaboration and gathering that information and new information as much as we can. This talks stereo imagery. Stereo imagery is something we use for targeting because you want us to make sure and hit the communications tower and not the orphanage, even though they're right next door to each other. And that stereo imagery allows us to do that. C, so hydrographic features, so getting into mapping the bottom of the ocean, if you will, in collaboration with the Navy. And so we're doing that full collaboration for us to provide that safety of navigation again for the maritime operations. So broadcast warnings and notice to mariners. So if NGA or its predecessor organizations existed in 1912, we probably could have told the Titanic there were icebergs out there. And so NOTAMs, that's a normal operation that we have. So that's foundation, and I spend a lot of time on that because if you don't have that foundation in the basement, then your house is going to fall apart. And so we build upon these. And so we're using, understanding the world, phenomenology. So phenomenology is us taking multispectral imagery, panchromatic imagery. So this panchromatic imagery happens to be the Fukushima nuclear power plant that got destroyed by a typhoon. And so we're using this high-resolution panchromatic imagery for us to understand what has happened under there. Again, so looking at the features and the activities and locations of that activity. This bathymetric data is that's the San Francisco Bay. And so for us to look at the value of the elevation of the bottom of that bay for safety of navigation. Radar, these are the two pyramids in Cairo. And so we're taking that to give us, radar gives us a z-value or elevation data. And so we're using that radar sensor. Geomagnetic, and so magnetic information, that's helping us also look at the change of the magnetic pole. Where is North Pole? Where's magnetic north? Constantly changing. And so that's changing every day. There's something, if you wanted to Google something good, Rod mentioned NGA's website, you could look up Chandler's wobble, and you'll see how the Earth wobbles. The Earth does not rotate, it wobbles. And so Chandler's wobble is the science which had determined that. So magnetic changes all the time. Infrared imagery gives us that infrared signature, a heat signature, if you will. LIDAR is an airborne platform that gives us high-resolution information about features on the Earth's surface. That's how we're starting to build higher-resolution 3D models. with an airborne platform. Open source. So open source, all of us know, we could go to the library, we could surf internet. There's also another, I mentioned 7 intelligence disciplines. There's another one that's called SOCMENT. Does anybody know what SOCMENT is? So SOCMENT is along with open source, and it's something that all of the current students deal with, which is social media intelligence. There's a great deal of social media intelligence that's evolving, and whether it's spoofing or it's real or it's just you're sharing pictures with someone, so multiple things, but SOCMENT has actually become more of a open source, another sensor for us to think about as we're looking at information that we're putting on the earth, trying to gather that down. So come down to a military aspect. There's a term right here, RSOI, so reception, staging, onward movement, and integration. And when we look at those, we go through the echelons of strategic to operational to tactical level information. And so showing the way and how we directly support the warfighter in every one of the stages of their operation. So as looking at the operations process, we look at understanding, visualizing, describing, detecting. As we go through that, that's the entire echelon all along here. Indications and warnings is one of our critical pieces because we have something called anticipatory intelligence. So we want to anticipate. That's one of the major thrusts of the national intelligence strategies, anticipating what's going to happen based upon what we've seen before. So one of our acts for the director of NGA also wears a second hat of the National System for Geospatial Intelligence. So this is a higher level above NGA in the collaboration with the combatant commands and with other parts of the U.S. government, such as the United States Geological Survey under Department of Interior. And so as we're doing the mapping of the United States, so it's standards, data standards, how we exchange data. We build something for Homeland Security. And so if a county of Leavenworth, city of Leavenworth, state of Kansas, the United States all use the same data set, then we can exchange information. If we fail to use the same data set or a different tool or a different format, then we can't communicate with each other. You remember on 9/11, part of the problem was communication, the inability to talk on the same networks and can't communicate with each other. And so it causes multiple problems. So we have all of these contributors in this circle of the National System for Geospatial Intelligence. It's actually about 400 different agencies. But then we have the one outside of here, the Allied System for Geospatial Intelligence. So our Five Eye partners, so you can see the flags there of our Five Eye partners, and they live in our footprint every day at NGA. So they are part of our ASG and NSG family. So the director of NGA manages that as the functional manager. So this is an example of trying to bring together, if you will, somewhat of a case study and understanding of how we bring this together, this Geoint beast. And so when we look at bin Laden, we took National Security Agency, SIGINT, the HUMINT from the CIA and from the DIA, and Department of Defense intelligence capabilities, and integrate those at the intelligence community level. So that was brought together, information was brought together to the intelligence community, and decisions were made to turn to another part of the IC, the National Reconnaissance Office, to go and sense that particular site. So they said, they gave that information, NRO went to this particular target area, and sensed the information and brought it to NGA, who then did the analysis. And so NGA did the analysis and did taking imagery intelligence, geospatial information, describe and depict the features and activities and locations on the Earth's surface and provide that to the folks that ran Operation Neptune Spear. And so from that particular beginning and moving forward, we're building 3D models, other visualization capabilities, and hand that off to a decision maker to make decisions. And so it's a sequence of events that has to occur, and there's not a clock on that. It's depend upon how quickly do you need to take care of that particular mission for that decision maker to make the right decision based upon the information you can provide them. Block and wire diagram, I wanted to show Admiral Sharp, and Admiral Sharp has these primary players, the Associate Directors of Operations and Capabilities. Those are two I want to emphasize and talk a little bit about within NGA structure because they're pretty important. Another one is this enterprise. So I'm going to talk about those three components of NGA structure to give you greater understanding of the roles and missions of NGA. So this Associate Director for Operations has these multiple offices that report to him. Right now that's Major General Cleveland, an Army MI officer. So he's managing that, and he's managing a pretty hefty group. So I'm not going to read these, I'll let you look at them, but under analysis and source and authorities. Under analysis is the no-kidding group that does analysis. Intelligence analysis, geographic information analysis. So we hear the term sources and methods. So they are using every source and every method possible to analyze that information to provide it to leaders. Looking at future information, future constellations, they're doing the exploitation of information. These are our treasures of tradecraft doing analysis every day. And so in those various categories of air, land, sea, science, other areas. So source gets us into providing the content and the services and that data and products, and they're providing that any place that's necessary. So we're looking at the best source to provide the analyst the best tool to provide the commander the best information. So it's all sequential within our agency, and they live together in that particular environment, driven by these authorities. So these experts in those particular fields, so you see the whole listing of some of those things I talked about: aeronautical, geography, cartography, maritime operations, hydrology, safety of navigation, and targeting. And so that entire group, these authorities work with these analysts and the source people every day. And so we full combination. The source people live with the National Reconnaissance Office and other authorities for us to get the best information to provide the analyst. The analysts are also replicated by the Army and the Army and the Marines and the Navy, not necessarily the Air Force. The Air Force has a different method in the way they do business, but we provide that analyst information for them to do the analysis of. So we're providing that also. Under General Cleveland, he also has the responsibility for what we call defense. In other words, our team at the Pentagon that's supporting the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and supporting the Joint Staff. And so that's a constant basis living right there in the Pentagon with the decision makers. Expeditionary ops, one of the reasons I wanted to mention that is because we are fully responsive. And so if you think about the Ebola crisis and going to Liberia, our person that was 100% full-time at 101st, he flew with the G2 into Liberia because he was providing support from a national agency level, and so that was his requirement. Similar kind of operations that might occur, your imagination could wander that says how we would support any kind of a expeditionary crisis operations. I have counterparts at all force comm elements within the Army. My counterparts that live there are fully deployable, so they're emergency essential, and so if an event occurs, they fly with the G2 staff. When that normal rotation occurs, that a unit has to go to a deployment site, my counterparts move with the division headquarters. So that's their responsibility. They know that when they sign that job, take that job. Those people under General Cleveland and that operations are these folks at the combatant commands and the folks at these agencies. And so these support, these agency and combatant command folks are part of this 22% of our agency that are forward deployed. And so rest of our primary force in Springfield, Virginia, and in St. Louis. So that's where our primary forces are of the NGA's 14,500 employees. You notice we have a pretty small military footprint of 3%. So pretty small, A lot of that has to do with aviation and maritime operations. Not a lot of ground forces do we have. But it's an excellent opportunity when you have a joint assignment opportunity for a military person to be assigned to NGA. The second associate director I wanted to mention was capabilities, and I'll mention that for a couple of reasons because of research. We have a tremendous requirement. I mentioned anticipatory intelligence. We have a requirement to research tools, data, science, academia, for us to bring together the best information we can. I had an opportunity to work with St. Louis University, PhD candidates that are doing research on how to use small unmanned aerial vehicles for us to gather information just over the hill, if you will, so that we could fly that and gather information to provide the information to the commander. And so physical models, activity models, the P&T, so this precision targeting and navigation and targeting, resilience, so how we have the best product at the time necessary, so we're doing that research. Ventures and innovation. In St. Louis is a significant stand-up going on right now, and for the next 3 years, NGA is building a $1.7 billion facility, and at that facility is our primary innovation and venture capitalists, where we hire students. We find the right student we want to hire. They might not have a security clearance. We spend the year they're waiting on the security clearance. They are doing innovation of apps, innovation of software, the better data science we can do. And so they're trying to create that. And NGA is doing a great job of bringing in the smartest young people out of college. So that's one of our major things. Now, another term that we coin here, AAA, artificial intelligence, automation, and augmentation. There's an awful lot going on in those, but that is the 21st century. When we talk about neural networks, we talk about artificial intelligence, how you integrate that into the best and the finest. And so it talks here about integrating those, the architecture, scaling the tradecraft, algorithms, and this leads into the data core. The data core is it's a whole new term within NGA because it's all about data. So back the other slide that talked about analysis, the director of analysis, she made the comment that she said, in order for her to analyze all the data she has today, it requires 6 million analysts, and that doesn't count what we're collecting today. So it's a continuous problem, and if you don't manage data correctly, then you're going to have a significant challenge. In 2012, a Harvard scientist said that a data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century. So there you go. I did want to mention enterprise also. And enterprise, the reason I want to mention enterprise is because the partner engagement office. So this is each one of the services along with partner engagement with industry and academia. So each one of the services in their Title 10 function of training, manning, and equipping. So NGA has the responsibility to work with and live with. So I have the opportunity to work under the Army NGA support team. So we're working with the services directly in each one of their operational strategic missions as well as in their education environment. And so I get that opportunity as part of that team. And building those relationships is part of our responsibility. We also have an international affairs office because we have to deal with all allies in a co-production. We do a co-production programs of data, safety of navigation, science. So we're doing a full collaboration with the international partners on a daily basis. So that last part of enterprise is dealing here with the services and with the international teams, because we have teams in both the Asia Pacific area and Europe. So that are involved in multiple collaboration at international level, and as well as those services. And on the bottom portion here is talking the intelligence centers or intelligence activities of the military. So we're very involved in each one of those. So in conclusion, I wanted to mention that Geoint we have our own joint publication, and so Geoint in support of joint operations, that's our responsibility. So it's at combatant command level or at a joint task force or at other task forces that are established by the military. All the doctrine, we're found in all the services doctrine, very embedded because everybody wants to know where they are. They want to know the location. They want to know what's going on the earth. They want a picture of it. They want something to visualize that. And we have always been multi-domain. It's not a new term for us. You can turn air, land, sea, space, and cyber. We've been there the whole time because we're adding that location, that X, Y, and Z to what we do every day. With that, I have a cool slide. There we go. That's what you get for getting the director's briefing. With that, I appreciate it, and I look forward to any questions, please. Sir, let the captain go.
So as electronic warfare plays a bigger role in the battlefield, there's increasing concern about GPS being degraded or spoofed. The Defense Advanced Ground Receiver, the Dagger, and other capabilities have cryptographic modules in them, which are advertised to mitigate the ability for enemy spoofing to be effective. Are you able to talk about that at the unclassified level, provide a point of contact that may be able to talk about what cryptographic modules do in GPS receivers to mitigate spoofing attacks?
No, I can't, but I think I know somebody that can.
Come see me.
That's a great question. With a Dagger, one of the things we do is that through the Army Geospatial Center is taking a military map and putting it into the proprietary map format for the Dagger. So I will say, on an acquisition level for the Army, why didn't you use a standard format that the agency has developed for years, and instead created a unique format? So that's a different kind of a problem, but electronic warfare, Mr. Gray can absolutely answer that question. Mike?
I was going to mention we've been getting stories on TV and news agencies that talking about the Chinese have these like attack satellites that could go after our GPSs. Is that really something we should be concerned about? Is that actually, or can you talk about that? I don't know.
Well, I guess whatever we read in the news, whatever it tells us in the news or in the journals or information could be true. It could be true what we hear, yeah. Absolutely. One part of that is that I have here, these 4 sheets of paper have all the commercial satellites that are flying right now. Those are just commercial. And these are sensing, these are ones I'm concerned with imagery and radar information. These aren't dealing with communications and other information or location, GPS type, but these are the commercial satellites that are flying right now. Every country in the world that owns them. And there's been the discussion, so what if one of those satellites breaks up? It becomes junk, but junk can destroy a good satellite. So you have other problems that occur, but the Chinese destroy one satellite, it could destroy one of theirs too. So there's all kinds of other problems. So, good question. Sir?
All this data collection, imagery, et cetera, and so on from all the satellites, how much do you actually use commercial satellite systems to do your work?
So I can't necessarily give you a percentage. I don't actually know. I'll give you an example is that there's a U.S. company called Planet Labs, planet.com. Planet Labs has 180 small sats, size of a microwave oven, flying around the Earth, imaging every spot on the Earth every day. So we're very dependent upon that to give us a macro level view. It will tell us that the Missouri River has flooded. It may not necessarily tell us where that levee was breached, but we will have information about the river, and then we can send in, then we take a UAV and fly over that to determine what levee broke where. So it's going to give us a high level, so it's echelons. But commercial imagery, we are very dependent upon that today. And we use our national systems for other reconnaissance missions.
Okay.
So, good point. Sir, be careful, sir.
Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Butler, I'm military faculty over at SAMS. Sir, my question for you today is what we're seeing right now with the discussion about multi-domain operations and about what is going to be required on the battlefield for commanders and the staffs that are operating for those commanders. The issue of being able to have access to certain types of information that normally, due to security clearance, security level, people just wouldn't know unless they'd been trained or been introduced, or you're a weird guy, Marine like me, who's been introduced here. So one of the great values that I've found is your PICS today technology. Are there any new innovative kind of what I would call soft apps or systems that aren't too classified but give people the idea or even the conceptual idea of understanding what type of products you can actually produce with this amalgamation of data? Be interested in your comments, sir.
So thank you, Colonel Butler. Appreciate you being an advocate. And PICS, PIX, is an NGA contract which provides that unclassified up to FOUO level information. It's a tremendous resource, and it's unappreciated or underappreciated. So as far as we continue, yes. So one of our significant issues which has evolved, which is providing greater information to those disadvantaged users. Absolutely. And we do have those initiatives. We have another one called NOME, N-O-M-E. NOME allows us to do almost mapping on the fly. We can build that, and it's enabled by a CAC card. So we do have that limitation of sharing it, but we're getting pretty close to having login and password capability, that disadvantaged user opportunity again. Our app store, so Rod mentioned our public internet page. We have an app store, and once you establish an account on there, then you can go in and download those apps for your Apple device, for your Android device, and we're developing those constantly. And this innovation and technology, we absolutely want to drive. I would end the comment with, you as a leader drive what we do. If you don't tell us you want something, we're going to make stuff up. We're going to think that you want us to go take an image of this area from this angle at this time of the day, when that's not what you wanted. And so until it gets to those 06, 07, 08 level command channels, General Gervais from the Army, Major General Gervais, she's driving the Army into one world terrain, taking 46 different databases and build one for live, virtual, constructive, and wargaming capabilities. And so she's driving that, and so that's telling us what the Army wants. And that's good. Our conduit to the Army in particular and to the services is through a geospatial a Geoint officer that lives right next door to the director of NGA. And if they come into that office and they said the Army wants, the Marine wants, if the Marines want it, then we're going to have to rack and stack it. Is it supporting an operational mission or supporting a Title 10 mission? So when people ask me for new maps of Azerbaijan, no, not unless you're paying for them, because the combatant commander of Azerbaijan doesn't care. So that's driving our prioritization. So great question. We're trying. I think we have a significant requirement to do that. Yes, sir. Thank you. Please, Michelle.
You know this challenge well. All of this data requires a pipeline and storage and capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So how does NGA interface with the signal community so that all this great, wonderful information can be accessed?
Yeah, it's a tremendous challenge, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess there's a combination. We have significant data centers, redundant data centers across the earth for us to support different forces, different times. We're very dependent upon SATCOM capability for us to move data around, and trying to, if you will, pre-position as much as we can. Keep constantly moving that. So when we have, so recently we had a unit out of the 82nd Airborne that deployed, and so hopefully they had the basic load of Geoint already ready, and that all they needed to do is get the most current information. But that's a question that a commander has to ask. On the unit status report, is there a place where it says data? I don't know. Should it be a place that says what data do I need and how much do I need? Whether it's paper analog maps or it's digits. So either one of those. So with the signal community, yeah, I guess we have a significant branch doing IT, and IT being communications in addition to that. So yeah, it is a significant challenge for us to push that data around as much as we can on 3 classification levels. So that's a pretty tough job. And that's why we have teams that live in the COCOMs, and the COCOMs then will drive us to support them more directly. So, sir?
Sir, Major Ryan Jokers. I work in the Instructional Design Division. How do we prevent Geoint from being collected on us? And what sort of resistance do we face when trying to collect Geoint?
Yeah, good question. We're a pretty open society. I can go into my county assessor's map and see what the taxes are that you're paying on your house and how much I'm paying and how much I need to be smarter than you to save more money on my assessment. And so anybody can do that. If we talk about our homeland, we have something we call Homeland Security Infrastructure Program, HSIP, that exists, and it exists on 2 levels, an unclassified level and a FOUO level. We're still an open society. All that information is available, whether it's a nuclear power plant or it's fertilizer factories or it's where the schools are, where the aviation schools are, where the truck driving schools are. All of that's public information. Now, as far as we do a lot of study, there is a lot of study done on our adversaries and their Geoint analysis and source, and what are they doing with automation and their research. We're doing that constantly. And we, NGA, really depend upon our people. People to be wiser in how we maintain and hold information close to our vest, and not give it away as much as we can of our new capabilities. There is an interesting textbook on activity-based intelligence. So activity-based intelligence is a methodology for doing analysis based upon the activity, not on an area. So what's more important? Should the commander focus on the activity or focus on a particular hill? And so it's our evolution in the last half century to understand. So this textbook is pretty valuable, and it's being implemented within NGA now for our ability to be anticipatory instead of reactive. So a lot to there. Please, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir. Captain Snyder, 12 Bravo. Within NGA, how is the agency changing from supporting COIN to a LISCO fight?
I would go back to the RSOI slide. We don't care.
Cool.
We can't, because we're dealing in the Defense Department or in Homeland Security or National Security. If you want a 1 to 5 million scale product or a 1 to 5,000 scale product, we're going to show you the geographic features on that to support those particular missions. You drive our requirements. It comes back to that again, is that coin, you wanted to know the ethnic breakdown of the city of Baghdad and where the Jersey barriers were. Okay, we can give that to you. But did you also want to know just what happens to the Mosul Dam when it explodes, so somebody destroys it, and what happens downriver? And so we're having that entire analysis. And so I think that that's kind of a large scale or just down to a Solder City level. Good question, though. It doesn't matter to us. It doesn't matter if you're in phase 0 or phase 5. You're consolidating gains or you're in full peacetime. We don't care. We're always in each one of those phases all the time. So, thank you. Anybody else? Please. Sir?
I've got one more, sir.
Yes, sir.
Lieutenant Colonel Butler again. Sir, interested in any insights or reaction yet with the official establishment of the Space Force? Have you had any new unique requests? I would imagine since a DOD, it's another service, probably not, because we tend to do things collectively as you presented in your brief already.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just interested if there were any new updates or anything that was unique that you could talk about.
We stood up a team instantly. I would go back, let me see if I can get back to right here. So could you dim the lights again, please? Thank you. Right there. So we already had Spacecom on there. We didn't have the seal. Star Wars had not released it yet, or whoever it was. Star Trek, who was it? Whoever released the seal. And so we're already there. We had a team there defining that, on that strategic level. So the combatant command. And Spacecom we're going to impact Spacecom. We have a tremendous collaboration requirement. The same as we do with the National Reconnaissance Office. The same as we do with the Air Force, multiple ways. And the same as our collaboration with NASA and with commercial imagery collection. So that continues on, and anything we could do dealing with space and dealing with cybercom. In addition to that, it comes to an X and a Y and a Z. Location, time, and space. Good question, though.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Sir?
I'll take one. I have one question for you, actually. The different rules and laws that dictate continental United States or U.S. citizen intelligence collection versus overseas. Obviously, you work in both areas. What dictates what you can and can't do for U.S. citizens or CONUS versus overseas?
So number one, it's against the law for us to spy on Americans. That's kind of that's an understood from executive order. We cannot do that. Second is we come back to our Title 50 responsibility that we will support the intelligence arm of the national security any way they need under a Title 50 code. That we will be able to do that. So as an intelligence agency, we could do that. And then our collaboration on the NSG, so the National System for Geospatial Intelligence. So doing that collaboration with Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, the infrastructure of different states and municipalities, we'll absolutely do that on standardization and data standardization tools that are used to exploit the data to make it available to the customers that need it, if you will. Thanks. Good question, Rod. So, sir?
All right. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. Appreciate that. Just remind you, 25 February, the next brown bag, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I finally want to thank trustee of our foundation, Mike Meyer, coming, and a couple of our civilian folks from all posts. Thank you very much. And then, of course, obviously the faculty and students that are here as part of the college, which is the core of this particular brown bag lecture series. Thank you all for being here. We hope to see you at the end of February for our next edition. Thank you.